Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about my 2 quarterback and SuperFlex draft strategies as we approach our upcoming 2025 fantasy football drafts. Now, for those of you who play in a 2QB or SuperFlex format, you guys are very familiar with the QB hero draft strategy that you can see to the right side of the screen. Now, before I go into even further detail regarding these upcoming strategies, for those of you who have somehow made it to this video but don't currently play in a 2QB or SuperFlex format, I just want to really quickly try to convince you as to why you should be participating for the upcoming 2025 season. First and foremost, a 2QB or SuperFlex format are the most competitive in the entire fantasy football industry, primarily because of there being more pieces on the board. What I mean is, in a 12-team league, when there are 12 extra quarterbacks whose weekly values are either winning or losing you matchups, it adds more depth and more levels to strategy, whether it's your waiver wire, your draft, or your trades for the upcoming season. When there are only 32 teams in the National Football League, but 12 teams in your fantasy league, that leaves 4 of the teams within your league vulnerable of not having a third quarterback and a backup for their upcoming bye weeks. So under the assumption that your 2 starting quarterbacks have different bye weeks, that means that 2 of your potential first 14 weeks prior to the NFL playoffs beginning are in jeopardy of being automatic losses because you don't have that third quarterback. That's 14% of your guaranteed games, weeks 1 through 14, up in the air and potentially becoming a loss because you didn't prioritize quarterback. So as we approach our drafts in a 2QB SuperFlex format, we're all fighting for quarterbacks early in our drafts. And when we talk about the waiver wire and an injury happening to the quarterback position, we're utilizing a lot of fab in the top priority in order to get a quarterback on our roster, whether we have the starter or not beforehand. Additionally, when we talk about more pieces on the board, with 12 additional quarterbacks contributing to our weekly matchups, there's more intricacy within trading because there are more pieces to be moved and there's more equivalent value, especially at the quarterback position. So as you approach this upcoming season, again, for those of you who play, you already know. But for those of you who haven't yet already, convince your league and be able to take advantage of the best format in all of fantasy football. Now, before I get into further talking about the draft strategy that you guys can see to the right side of the screen, a couple reminders. For those of you who are looking for my thoughts on a specific strategy, as I'll go over a handful over the course of today's episode, be sure to travel down to the description and check out the timestamps while you're down there. If you haven't yet already, of course, subscribe to the channel. Besides the daily videos, we'll have upcoming daily live streams for this channel for the entirety of the season. Of course, in order to provide you guys with as much information as possible and help you win a 2025 fantasy football championship. The final thing I wanted to mention, for those of you who want an advantage upon your league mates for your upcoming draft, but of course for every single Sunday for the remainder of the season, be sure to travel down to the description and check out Betr. Again, not only am I going to be providing picks and putting my predictions to the test all season long via Betr, again, partnering with them for the entirety of this upcoming fantasy football season, but I'm also going to be providing rankings. All you have to do is click on the link down below, sign up using code Andrew, make that first time deposit minimum of $10, and make a minimum $1 play within the sports realm, and I'll go ahead and send my rankings from my email directly to yours. Over the course of the month of August, updated weekly, by position, by tier, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, kicker, defense, and flex for both half and full PPR. But the rankings won't stop there. I'll continue to send you weekly rankings every single Sunday morning for the remainder of the season to help you make the right decisions on Sunday mornings and, of course, capture a 2025 fantasy football championship. So take advantage of the opportunity. Check out Betr today, and also check out the map to the right side of the screen to determine your eligibility based on your location. And if you play up to $10 today, you'll get up to $30 instantly. And one of the plays that I'll be making going into the upcoming preseason games revolves around the Indianapolis Colts taking on the Green Bay Packers. And that's primarily because the quarterback competition between Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson has yet to be settled. So there's always an opportunity in which they're both going to play a ton of this upcoming matchup in order to prove who truly does deserve to be the starter come week 1 for the Indianapolis Colts. I'm taking more on both of their passing yards within this overall conversation. So again, take advantage of the opportunity. Check out Betr today. I greatly appreciate all the support. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's talk about quarterback draft strategies in regards to a 2 quarterback format. Now, I want to first and foremost talk about the drop-off in production at the quarterback position. Based on a 4-point per passing touchdown format in 2024, we found that the top 24 quarterbacks produced as such. Therefore, this kind of gives you a representation of just how valuable it is to have top tier quarterback play contributing to your team's fantasy upside. Because if you were to wait on a quarterback and potentially take a lower tier player that lives up to that lower tier standard, let's say, for example, the quarterback 19 to 24, their overall contributions, even though you are drafting them at a later position, their overall contributions really aren't going to help you capture a fantasy football championship, but potentially just get you to the dance. Ultimately, if you want to go ahead and compete, we're talking about prioritizing the top tier of the quarterback conversation. Even when we go ahead and develop the averages of the top 24 quarterback fantasy point totals from 2022 to 2024 in a 4-point per passing touchdown league, it's still very similar in terms of the drop off in production. We still want elite play, and there's a reason why within your upcoming 2QB or SuperFlex leagues, the first 5 selections of your draft should probably go as, in any particular order, the top 5 quarterbacks: Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels, and Joe Burrow. And that's how it should be done. So for those of you who are questioning, who should I be drafting early in my upcoming leagues? You have to prioritize the quarterback position, especially considering they have such high potential ceilings. Now, if you play in a 6-point per passing touchdown league, it's even that much more gross of a potential separation. If you play in a 6-point per passing touchdown league, I would even suggest that you guys potentially implore a 3rd round reversal. That means after the final selection of the 2nd round, the 1.12 that began the draft would now be the 3.01, and they would have the first pick of the 3rd round, and then the draft would continue as such as if it was normal. Just going ahead and potentially putting that out there for those of you who are potentially interested. I think that is a proper approach, considering it evens it out that much more in a 6-point per passing touchdown format. Otherwise, whoever has a top 5 selection, should always make the playoffs considering their primary quarterback's contributions. And even if we look at the averages over the course of the last 3 seasons, it is very much so in the favor of teams who have a top 5 selection in comparison to those who are going to have a late 1st round selection and are going to be losing a potential 150 points just off of 10 selections of separation, which again, the running back position and the wide receiver positions don't have that much separation of value within such a short distance of time. Nonetheless, let's go ahead and let's talk about some strategies that I particularly like to explore and utilize within my upcoming 2 quarterback and SuperFlex formats. Of course, I shared this earlier. So as you approach your upcoming 2 quarterback or SuperFlex drafts, you have to understand that in a 4-point per passing touchdown league, what often happens is about 5 to 7 quarterbacks go in the 1st round. If you're playing in a 6-point per passing touchdown league, I would say that 8 to 9 quarterbacks on average are taken in the 1st round. So it really just depends. Situations are situational. Every single draft board is different, but I, from my experience this offseason and in years past, have collected that data, and that's what I feel very comfortable in terms of assuming is going to happen within the 1st round of your draft in this kind of a format. So of course, we always have to react and adapt, but under the assumption you have an early 1st round selection, I think it's very much so in your favor to prioritize quarterbacks. So for example, if in your 1st round you were going to prioritize the value of someone like Jalen Hurts, who can potentially go at the 1.03, 1.04, depending on your league mates' preferences, whether they want a Jaden Daniels at the 1.03, whether they sleep on someone like Josh Allen, doesn't matter. So once you've solidified a top 5 quarterback, then the strategy would be trying to prioritize and solidify top 12 standing at the wide receiver and running back position, to which in rounds 2 and 3, you would prioritize wide receiver and of course, potentially running back. Now, in the most recent drafts that I've conducted, I have seen and specifically even constructed a team in which you go Jalen Hurts in the 1st round, find Amon-Ra falling to you in the 2nd round, because again, the priority of quarterback, whether it's in the 1st or 2nd round, they quickly come off the board, which shoves down the value of players that should never be a late 2nd. But in this case, Amon-Ra falls to the lower end of the 2nd round, followed by pairing up a stack combo between A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts with your 3rd round selection, somehow, someway, Josh Jacobs falling to the 4th, and then only then reintegrating the quarterback conversation from rounds 5 through 7. Now, it doesn't have to be someone like Trevor Lawrence, who goes within the 5th round, but there are other players within that same sort of capacity and still are currently within that ADP range, like a J.J. McCarthy or Jordan Love, a C.J. Stroud, a Bryce Young, a Tua Tagovailoa, a Geno Smith, who you could get in the 5th, 6th, or 7th round in order to pair that up with your primary stub quarterback that you prioritized. So this entire approach truly is just grabbing an early quarterback and then punting on the 2nd one until later on, while you prioritize and establish depth at your wide receiver, running back, and tight end positions, which again, I think is an incredible approach for this upcoming season, depending on where you're selecting. If you're selecting in the late first round, I don't think that this is something that you should be prioritizing unless a quarterback such as Allen, Lamar, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, or Joe Burrow falls into your lap. In that case, sure, you can definitely explore with this, overall approach. But under the assumption that you potentially don't have the opportunity to do so, you may want to look towards my modified hero strategy approach, in which you are selecting at minimum 2 quarterbacks within your first 4 rounds. That has to be a guarantee. And that, in my opinion, over the years of playing in my own home league SuperFlex formats. Now, many may think that this is a heavy approach. This is not a heavy approach. Heavy would be double quarterbacks in rounds 1 and 2 and prioritizing in that regard. But in this circumstance, again, you are still prioritizing a quarterback in the first round, hoping that someone like Joe Burrow falls to you at like the 1.09, for example, which again, I have had that happen already this offseason, in which in the second round, you follow that with a Neighbors. In the third round, you get a Bucky Irving. In the fourth round, you follow with a Brock Purdy, who continues to fall down draft boards, which I don't understand. I understand they didn't play well, last season, but then you can go ahead and pair him up with his stack of George Kittle in the fifth, because again, on Sleeper, George Kittle somehow, some way, is a 4th round selection in terms of ADP. And when you go ahead and you add the SuperFlex format and the quarterback's taken ahead of him, and that continues to fill potentially at least a minimum of 12 quarterbacks selected within the first 2 rounds, if not even more by the time the 3rd round has finished. Once you get to the 5th round, George Kittle is available in that range, if not potentially Mike Evans. And don't forget, we are primarily doing this in order to kind of avoid the drop-off in production at the quarterback position, because we don't want to sustain the drop-off that very well could occur if we were to wait at the quarterback conversation for a later round selection. I think this is a great approach. Again, you get the opportunity of 2 top 12 quarterbacks, a top 12 running back, wide receiver, and a tight end. And if you didn't want to go with the tight end position, you want to kick that can down the road, like we've talked about in our tight end draft strategy video, you can wait for the later rounds of a Tyler Warren way down the line in the 9th, 10th round of this kind of a league. Or maybe even 11th round. You never know, because again, people got to draft their 3rd quarterbacks. But like I mentioned, even if you don't want to take a tight end, you don't have to. You can continue to stack upon running backs and wide receivers and build it that way and continue to structure that approach. Now, when we talk about the potential of the running backs and wide receivers that we're finding in rounds 2 and 3, again, these are going to be typically, 1st and 2nd round picks in our normal drafts. Now, when we look at the history of fantasy football, specifically the last 3 seasons, based on top 10 ADP at both the running back and wide receiver positions, we had equivalent return rates based on the selection. When we're talking about the top 10 selected running backs and wide receivers, based on ADP from 2022 to 2024, we had 19 wide receivers and 19 running backs return value, equal across the board. So again, you want to potentially just try to even it out, get a running back, get a wide receiver, just like we do in a regular kind of hero strategy for an RB approach, but just have equal representation as you approach the 4th round, so that when you get there, you don't have to worry about that 5th round and what you're going to potentially find there at the running back position. Hopefully, if you were to start quarterback, wide receiver, quarterback, hopefully by the time you get to round 5, somebody like Alvin Kamara is still available in which you could take advantage of it. All right, now for those of you who want to go even more quarterback heavy, you play in a 6-point per passing touchdown league, I would say that the double hero QB or the heavy QB draft strategy is one that you should be utilizing in 2025, in which you are drafting 2 quarterbacks within the first 3 rounds at a base minimum, if not in the first 2 rounds of your league. Now, one of the more recent drafts that I've conducted, where I was selecting from the 1.01 and I selected Josh Allen in specific, I followed with BTJ in the 2nd round, and on that turn, grabbed Kyler Murray, primarily because I knew by the time the draft came back to me in the 4th and 5th rounds, the quarterback quality was going to be far less than what Kyler Murray could present in comparison to the running back value that I was going to take a discount on accordingly. Therefore, I waited, found James Cook, paired him up with Josh Allen, so that way I have every single rushing touchdown from the organization in my back pocket, then somehow found JSN in round 5. There is still a lot of potential in which you can draft 2 quarterbacks within the first 2 rounds, in which you're getting someone even better than Kyler Murray, but this would require you to be drafting in the middle of round 1, and you're not going to be exposed to someone like Josh Allen. Perhaps you'll have to take a Joe Burrow in the middle of the first, and then in that 2nd round selection, potentially grabbing someone like Baker Mayfield. But the way that I see it within this upcoming season, there's such a huge drop off from the top 5 quarterbacks to the rest of the field that I think it's a little bit much of a premature selection. Therefore, you would only explore this strategy under the assumption that you're selecting early in the first, very similar to the hero strategy, while the modified strategy allows that for wherever you select from, whether it be mid or late in the first round, to explore that approach. Now, one of the final strategies I wanted to go ahead and review really quickly is the idea of going zero quarterbacks, which many of you, I'm sure, have found success exploring, but this is 100% contingent on your league mates' behaviors and whether or not they prioritize quarterback in a 2QB league. If they don't, you don't have to zig when they zag, and you can follow suit and you can take advantage of selecting early wide receivers and running backs, and you can follow as such. But if you play in a league like one of mine, in which the quarterback position is taken early, and like I mentioned before, about 6 to 7 quarterbacks are taken within the first round, and by the end of the second round, 12 are gone. If you're playing in a league like that, you're at the mercy of your league mates, because if you were to potentially in the first round prioritize someone like in the middle of the first, let's say at the 1.06 or 7, Jamar Chase. In the second round, I've seen many of times Derrick Henry fall to that range. Perfect, you select Derrick Henry. In the third round, you once again double down with the idea of not selecting a quarterback, and potentially someone like Ladd McConkey or Kyron Williams, or potentially even both of them are available in rounds 3 and 4, because the rest of your league mates are prioritizing the quarterback conversation, as 2 of their first 3 selections are quarterback, and let's say 14 to 16 are taken off the board throughout that span of time. You can solidify yourself with incredible depth at running back and wide receiver. But in this approach, you are 100% at the mercy of the quarterbacks that you select within rounds 5, 6, 7, whatever you end up exploring. At this current moment, when I look at rounds 5, 6, 7, I talked about it earlier, the Trevor Lawrence, the JJ McCarthy's, the Jordan Loves, the Geno Smith, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, those players are typically available within that range, which I often find is extremely difficult to just hope that these guys can play far beyond their means. Now, every season, there are players that play far beyond their means of the quarterback conversation, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But as we approach our upcoming draft, this is probably my least desired position to be in, because even though this most recent year in 2024, Sam Darnold and Bo Nix played far beyond their means and were both top 10 at the position in a 4-point and 6-point per passing touchdown format, being able to find this year's Bo Nix and Sam Darnold is incredibly difficult to do. Now, sure, that could come in the form of a JJ McCarthy filling in for Sam Darnold, or a Cam Ward, who is a rookie first-round selected quarterback that, again, even though very similar to Bo Nix, we're not anticipating immediate success, could very easily find that this upcoming season. Now, like I've said before, any of these strategies can be utilized and can find success. It's just purely a matter of the league that you play within and the different draft kind of personalities and patterns that your league mates explore within their upcoming draft. Now, I do want to talk about the strategy behind the third quarterback and potentially even fourth quarterback selection within our upcoming drafts, because again, I think that is incredibly important to understanding the value and taking advantage of having a third quarterback, because if you were going to forfeit 14% of your upcoming matchups from weeks 1 through 14, that might be putting yourself in a little bit more extra danger than you need to. The way that I see it, it's purely just trying to grab a quarterback that is irreplaceable, specifically quarterbacks that are young enough or the teams have utilized enough draft capital on them in which benching them is not a potential option. Bryce Young is a rare occurrence last season to have taken place to where he got benched. I don't see that happening to guys like Michael Penix or Cam Ward, and that's a reason why I have both of them on screen. I think these are incredible players. Now, in the last couple seasons, when I've talked about in 2022, 2023, and 2024, when I made this exact same video in terms of talking about the strategies that we want to approach our upcoming season with, in 2022, I suggested Jared Goff, 23 was Jordan Love, 24 was Sam Darnold. All irreplaceable quarterbacks at their position. I think going into this upcoming season, that revolves around the idea of a Penix, a Cam Ward, an Aaron Rodgers. I would even say Geno Smith and Bryce Young. But again, Geno Smith, Bryce Young are going at a far higher potential ADP and value point in comparison to the quarterbacks that you see on screen, in which you can get these guys as your third rather than paying up for a second-tier quarterback for your third, which again, you can certainly do so. Just a matter of how your league mates are going to react and how you've built your roster up until that point. Now, again, the reason why you are drafting a third and if not a fourth quarterback is because you want to have the irreplaceable third. So when bye weeks arrive, you are in a great position. And then once your bye weeks disappear, you can even utilize these quarterbacks as trade fodder. Or if someone like Michael Penix comes out and lights up the league this upcoming season, potentially even trading your quarterback too for a running back or wide receiver or tight end later in the season, and then utilizing Penix after his bye week as your QB2 for the remainder of the year. Now, when we're looking for a fourth potential quarterback on roster, the way that I see it, there's only a couple situations in which you can kind of take advantage of this. And we took advantage of this last season, in which I suggested selecting both Justin Fields and Russell Wilson as your third and fourth quarterback, so that regardless of who won the competition, you had the starting quarterback. And like I mentioned earlier, when we were putting together the play for this upcoming week's NFL preseason games with Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones both going more on their passing yards via Betr, maybe drafting both of those. So regardless of who's the starting quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts, you have that value, and you have a third quarterback that is on roster, has rushing upside, and you've utilized very little draft capital on because there is so much uncertainty within the organization. So again, these are the strategies that I'm going to utilize going into my upcoming drafts. For those of you guys who want to hear more of my strategies, again, you can find my 2025 Fantasy Football Draft Guide via Patreon. It's exclusively there. There's a link down in the description for those of you who are interested in, of course, getting my draft guide, the subsequent rankings that go alongside of them, weekly updates to those rankings, so that regardless of when you're drafting, of course, you're ready to go. Additionally, you can ask me unlimited questions via the Patreon and Discord Messenger. Of course, speaking of Discord, you'll get private access to our server and our community. All that available, linked down in the description for those of you who are interested. But before we close out today's video, I just want to go ahead and once again revisit the modified hero strategy. Even though you may see players like Neighbors, Bucky, Purdy, and Kittle on screen, who you select isn't really as important as the approach in its specificity. Yes, the priority is two quarterbacks. So whether your first quarterback ends up being Burrow or Allen or Hurts or Baker, it doesn't matter. The whole idea revolves around structuring the team based on two top-tier quarterback talents who are going to have the ability to be top 12 at the position. Because after we get past the top 12, really there is a significant drop-off there. So besides Purdy, I feel comfortable with this approach this season with guys like Justin Herbert, Jared Goff, Drake May, Justin Fields as my QB2. And that's pretty much who is, potentially going off the board in the late third and early fourth. So you can explore that overall approach regardless of who you are selecting, but of course, taking advantage of this modified hero strategy. But again, I'm sure many of you have found success with other strategies, as have I. It's just purely a matter of the league, the sequence, and the situation, and adapting to that current draft and how it ends up turning out. But as we approach this upcoming season, I'm going to be utilizing a lot of modified hero, and potentially you guys can do so as well. All right, that's going to cover it for me today. Thank you everybody for watching. I'll be back tomorrow, of course, again, with daily fantasy football content. So be sure to subscribe, click the bell notification button to stay up to date on my latest content. But outside of that, of course, good luck on your upcoming drafts. And until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.